This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Tuesday, September 4th, 2012 in St. Louis, Missouri. This Agile Life, Episode 3, Lean 6 Cobra Kai. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Mr. Amos King. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. How are you doing today, John?
Very well. And a special guest host today joining us on very short notice, Mr. Andrew Radford.
It's good to be here.
Thank you, Andrew.
And Andrew's mustache.
Who will speak quite eloquently throughout the night.
The mustache or Andrew?
Yes. Okay, let's check the news to see what's happening in the world of Agile development. Amos, you're up first with our first story today.
Okay, so during the Agile 2012 conference in Dallas, where our own Jason Tice was speaking, Version 1 announced the opening of their State of the Agile Development Survey. The survey is intended to collect information about the practices used by industry respondents to adopt the scale of Agile development initiatives. That sounds like a bunch of marketing speak to me. More than 6,000 responses were collected in 2011. Wow, I can't read for crap today. The survey will remain open through the end of September. Survey respondents will be the first to receive the results of the survey and will be entered to win a drawing for 1 MacBook Pro, 2 iPads, and 3 Amazon gift cards. Can you win all 3 of them?
No, I think you can. But I think you win all 3 gift cards or all 2 iPads, both iPads.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I think it's like three different distinct giveaways.
You can also find the link in our show notes for the survey. I went out to take the survey today because I thought it would be really cool, and it's definitely not worth the iPads, the Amazon gift cards. It may be worth the MacBook Pro. I did not get all the way through the survey. There were a lot of questions that were really focused on, so what does your Scrum Master do? And at that point, I was a little frustrated and just moved on because they seemed to be pushing you towards an ideal goal for them. I don't know. I don't know a whole lot of what version 1 does, but I couldn't finish taking the survey because most of the questions I didn't feel like I could answer.
So you don't think it had anything to do with your ADD?
No, I was pretty focused at that time. It was a hyper-focused situation there because I knew that there might be a MacBook Pro on the line.
Right.
And mine is 5 years old and weighs 1,200 pounds. So.
And has at least 10 stickers on the front of it.
Oh, yeah. I start putting stickers on my laptop about the time that I decide that I'm going to get rid of it. And the more stickers I have, the more I realize that I need a new laptop. And it's currently got very little space on the backside of it for new stickers. And the bigger the sticker, I put on big stickers too because I told my wife this. So I put on big stickers to cover more area so that I can go buy a new laptop, and she still hasn't let me yet.
I see. So once you get it all covered up, it's time for a new one.
That's what I keep telling my wife, but she doesn't listen.
Well, if you're listening, Amos's wife, please let him buy a new laptop.
Oh, that was very nice of you, John.
Okay, Federal News Radio reports that for years, the Departments of Veteran Affairs and Defense have wanted to integrate their record systems. Recently, the Secretaries of Veteran Affairs and Defense, Eric Shasenik and Leon Panetta,
Can you pronounce both of those again, just for fun?
I think I'm butchering it. I should be able to say Leon Panetta. Eric Shinseki is actually his name. Those 2 fellers have agreed to work in earnest to accomplish this goal. Both departments recognize that they won't be able to accomplish this aggressive goal using their traditional and antiquated waterfall approach. As such, Dr. Barclay Butler, the director of the Intra-Agency Program Office, will use an Agile acquisition mindset in Agile development to quickly develop and deliver key capabilities. The first set of key capabilities is scheduled for delivery at the end of 2014. I think this will be something interesting to watch and see what kind of progress the Veteran Affairs and Defense Departments make towards incorporating some Agile development
I don't know. I have a lot of hope out for them, especially with the integrated health record system. A lot of companies have no interest in having an integrated health record system because then they can't sell their proprietary system. So I've dealt with a lot of this before and tried to track it down. So I hope that they can come up with something and get everybody to agree upon it, because right now there have been talks of laws in order to integrate these things and forcing people to do it, but the companies with big money that are making money off of their health record proprietary systems have no interest in every system being able to talk to every other, because then what do they have to offer over somebody else? Instead of becoming the record itself, it becomes, and you have to actually have a good idea for your product that's better than someone else's. And it's, if you don't have to have good ideas, then why not keep going the way you're going and making billions of dollars?
So this is a little different, given that it's the government and the Department of Defense.
Well, that usually makes me think it's going to fail anyway.
Well, of course.
It'll cost billions of dollars and fail.
But I have to give them some credit for recognizing that, given their aggressive time schedule, Dr. Barclay Butler, he recognizes that they maybe can't just do things the same old way that they've been doing them, and that he wants to look at using some agile approaches to improving their software delivery process.
Do you think Todd Aiken was on the committee for this?
He
does talk a lot about healthcare.
Kind of.
Hey, Ben & Jerry's is coming out with a new flavor.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's Todd Aiken's illegitimate grape. But it's okay. As long as your body knows that it's illegitimate, you won't gain weight.
Beautiful. I'm glad we were able to work a Todd Aiken joke into this podcast.
Yeah.
Because we're the only podcast so far that didn't have any Todd Aiken jokes in it. So.
Probably. And we're in Missouri, so it's very fitting.
That's right.
Oh, I can't believe that we admitted that.
Let's see what's up next in our discussion backlog, gentlemen. First item in the backlog tonight is Kanban. Ooh, Kanban. The mystical Kanban, right? So we'll give you a little background on Kanban, a little brief history on Kanban. So Kanban originates, I'll probably say Kanban like a zillion times and get all tongue-tied. Kanban originates in Japan from Toyota. It's a lean manufacturing methodology used at Toyota, pioneered at Toyota, to reduce waste and reduce the need for having a ton of inventory on hand. And in the past, 5 or 10 years, I guess, the software development industry has adopted and adapted Kanban as a way to eliminate waste in software development. So, Amos, Andrew, do you guys use Kanban on your teams?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, we're currently using Kanban on the project I'm on now, and we were using it on the project I was on previously that I moved off of about a month ago.
So was your experience limited to just those two projects?
No, I've used it, I think, just about every project I've been on at Asynchrony, and that's been for the past 2 years.
Do you feel pretty comfortable with it? You like it?
Yes. I like the flow of it, that you don't get tied down in as much in iterations and about, okay, what iteration does this story go into? It's like, oh, well, this didn't finish, so we got to move it to the next iteration. And it's iterations ended up feeling like an artificial distinction.
So I kind of have the same deal as Amos. I have used Kanban on quite a few projects, and on my current project, we just really got rid of the idea of any iteration whatsoever. We just kind of demo things or give them out to the customer as we finish features. And it has really helped out a lot in the fact that we're not sitting around on Thursday if we finish things early going, oh, now what are we going to do? Because tomorrow is the end of it and it's Thursday afternoon. We always seem to have some stuff going through. But we aren't using it traditionally where you have a big board or even an electronic board. We kind of do. We're using Lighthouse, and we use different buckets in Lighthouse as the Kanban pieces. And then our visual board that we actually have up for everybody to see just has not started, in process, and finished. And those are the only 3 steps on our visual board, and then everything else we keep track of the little steps in Lighthouse. And it's worked out really well, especially since it's in Lighthouse and people keep it up to date. If somebody's working from home or anything like that, they can always get to it and see where we are.
So let me do a brief overview of how Kanban works and how we use it on software development projects. And Amos and Andrew, you guys just jump in as I'm giving the description if you'd like to add on or take exception with anything that I'm saying.
Andy and I will be doing some blackface comedy later, like our old radio counterparts.
I don't think he goes by Andy.
Well, for purposes of this joke, I do. But normally, I go by Andrew.
Purpose of the Amos and Andy joke that nobody in our audience probably gets because
Most
They've
of them
got
aren't old
Google. They'll figure it out.
I'm not really
And
old
they'll
enough
be
either,
offended.
but growing up with the name Amos, I was kind of inundated with that quite often.
right, you had to be forced into learning what it meant.
Yep.
Okay, so the basics of Kanban. So for starters, most people have a physical Kanban board, which is a spot on a whiteboard maybe. It could be some space on a cube wall where you would have a number of cards that represent work. Could be stories in your backlog. It could be tasks. It could be a lot of personal Kanban boards exist where people put tasks that they're working on their personal Kanban board and work them. So the cards themselves represent work that needs to be done, and work is pulled across the board from working from the rightmost cues on the board back towards the left, but you're always pulling towards the right. So the main principles of Kanban is that you're visualizing what the team's workflow is. So within these cues that go across the top of your Kanban board, they might say things like ready for development or done with development or ready to be tested. These various things that are stages, that are steps in the workflow, your software development workflow on your team. So as a card enters the Kanban board, it might go to the ready for development queue, and as it's ready to be worked, it'll be pulled through the queue into maybe development. Once it's done with development, someone will pull it into testing. But the key is that the individuals that do the work don't necessarily move the card. The card is marked as done, and the next group that's available to do something will come and pull a done card. They'll actually pull the card that's furthest to the right on the Kanban board, and they'll work on that. The idea is that this limits the amount of work in progress, and it allows you to manage your workflow, see what's going where.
So we do it a little differently as far as the pull push thing. Yes, we normally do a lot of pull, but when things go into QA, when we're done with coding, we go ahead and put it in QA because we don't have like a coding done state due to our electronic Kanban board. We did have it, but it became just the QA was going through things so quickly that they found it artificial to have this done state, especially without we do it all electronically. So we got rid of that, and then to limit our workflow, what we really did was each workstation is based on a specific feature. So our workflow limit is the number of workstation pairs that we have. And that's how we limit it, but we also limit each workstation to a specific feature. And that has worked out really, really well, and it helps us look at, the Kanban is supposed to help you figure out your resources. Well, whenever each workstation is working on one feature, I know the resources for that feature pretty easily. And I don't have to worry about, all 3 of them are on that feature, and now we have this other feature that's kind of come up as a priority, and people getting confused at what's working where, and it helped out a lot with focusing people on different things. They just look at we color code our workstations. They just look at the color of it, and they're like, okay, now I know what feature I'm on.
One of the things that I get questioned the most about regarding Kanban is the need for setting limits for the number of items that can be in progress at any given time.
Anybody who tells you that they don't need to set limits has not actually reached complete frustration yet.
In what way?
We went without WIP limits, and we ended up with stories and features, like a bunch of stuff would get into QA or get backlogged by design and things like that. And you just have so many balls in the air that when you're going back and forth with design or QA because you've had an issue, it can be super frustrating to see. I have 8 different things in the air. I only have 3 workstations on the team, and now I can't go forward with anything. And we just that's why we went down to the every workstation has a feature on it, is because it was just super frustrating trying to keep all those balls in the air, and you're branching and merging constantly, which is great, but at a certain point your mind just can't hold that much when you're bouncing around that fast.
And you can you lose a lot of context on a story if it's half done and, you set it aside because you're waiting on something else, and then it gets forgotten or people forgot what they were doing on it. As if you leave it too long, it's usually a bad thing.
Yeah, that was a big thing with us. It really affected us. It affects us way more if we can't do continuous deployment. Continuous deployment kind of helps us keep the balls in the air to a minimum. But whenever you have 5 or 6 features out there that the customer wants you to hold on to for some reason and not release, then you have these 5 or 6 different features that you have to keep up to date with your development branch or up to date with your master branch. And so you're just trying to merge things into them constantly, and one of them gets dropped on the floor, you forget about it, or you merge at the same time that someone else is merging into it, and then you both try to push, and it was horrific trying to just, when you had more balls in the air than you had resources, it was pretty difficult.
So one of the concepts with limiting your WIP is having a single piece flow where you have like one unit of work, maybe one feature, or some people maybe even like one type of a story that they'd want the entire team to swarm on. How do you guys work? Do you have multiple features going on at any given time, or do you limit your work in progress to a single feature with multiple stories, or some combination
Andrew?
Of those?
I'm going to speak to my previous project because I'm the only .NET developer on my current project, so I don't have a lot of it's like, okay, we'll have one .NET story going on at a time. But you have to find the sweet spot between having everybody working on the same feature, because a lot of times you're going to have merge conflicts, and everybody hates those. Especially, I always seem to draw the short straw in the merge conflict and end up having to do the rebase or the merge and settling the conflicts. But you don't want things to be too wildly different, because again, then you'll have too much up in the air at the same time. You want something that you can deliver. So it's going to depend on the individual project.
Do you think it depends more on the size of the project or how the team works, or what would you say it depends on?
I guess it's going to depend on the team size, because it's a lot easier for 2 pairs to work on a feature than 5 pairs to work on the same feature without having merge conflicts. And it's also going to depend how your code is set up. If smaller classes, you're going to run into merge conflicts less often. And there's certain things that are always a problem. It's like, okay, I'll give an example from a .NET project. If we're using link to SQL. So only one person can modify the DBML at a time because it's a designer file with code gen. So you're not going to be able to merge the changes. So that's definitely an area that you only want one pair at a time in. It helps if you're going to be making those changes to keep those stories small, or get it to where you can commit it and other people can merge that into their branches.
What do you guys do, Amos?
I got lost in what Andrew was saying and staring at his mustache. Can you ask the question again?
That seems to be a problem. It's like has its own ability to control minds and influence others. So we were talking about limiting WIP. We were specifically talking about how your team works in terms of how many features you allow to be active and in progress at any given time on the team. So how many people are on the team you're actively working on, Amos?
Right now we have 7 people, so we have one workstation set to maintenance tasks, and they kind of bounce around and check out production, see if they can find any bugs and things like that. And then we have the 3 other workstations, each set to a specific feature. So our WIP limit is really for the entire Kanban is really the number of features. We don't look at a WIP limit as the number of stories. And then WIP limits per section, like coding or QA or design review or anything like that, is all based on the number of workstations. So really ours is 1 per feature. So across the board, it's 1 per feature, but we don't have a 1-story. We don't have a WIP limit for the board in general. So if I have 30 stories going through the board on 1 feature, that feature doesn't necessarily stop. Especially with the design review stuff, as a developer, we do pretty well doing design review, but ultimately it comes down to, is the designer happy with the final design? And sometimes, he's like, oh, could you move that 2 pixels to the left? Well, I didn't even know that it needed to go 2 pixels to the left. So there are some things where we have some queues that kind of back up, and they don't really have a limit. They just get big until we start going, hey, we really need to release this feature because it's all waiting on you.
So that sounds like something that can hurt you from time to time.
It does. But I have not found a set limit that I can set on that. It's really, if everything else is caught up to you, that's when it becomes a problem.
How about 1? How about a limit of 1?
We've tried that. And that's usually how we start, is we limit everything to 1 and then increase the limit as need be. Because that's where we find our comfort. And you really know when you get too high, but it's hard to tell. And you really know when you're too low, but it's hard to tell if there's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle.
What's the difference of having a sweet spot versus 1?
What do you mean by it?
Well, 1 seems like the sweet spot.
Well, what if you have 2 resources that can do that job? Then you have 1 resource just sitting around because the other one's already grabbed that spot.
They're not, so those guys aren't paired. They can't swarm on that one thing. I'm playing devil's advocate a little
bit. By
bit.
Resources, I'm saying, let's say you have 2 pairs.
Right. So a lot of people argue that, or a lot of the purists, some of the Kanban purists, especially the ones that advocate single piece flow, say that your WIP limit should always be 1, and you just have this mass of protoplasm that goes from this queue to that queue, and they just work things, ding, 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 and produce them, right? And which is basically the way an automotive manufacturing line is. It's a single piece at a time. Now there are different stages, right?
I guess we kind of have that if you look at each feature as having its own Kanban board, because then the feature, at least at the coding level, is 1 at a time. We have a pair. At the QA level, it's 1 at a time. We have, I guess kind of 1 at a time. It's 1 at a time to work on it, but there's the done queue. And coders will go off and do some QA stuff, and we really kind of switch back and forth in that role. We do have a dedicated QA person, but sometimes she's backed up, and we need to take control of that stuff. But it's like I said with the designer, I don't know what to do other than let it back up behind him, because he's by himself, but he may say, I need you to move that 2 pixels, and I'm not going to see that. No matter how hard I look at his PSD file, I'm not going to realize that I need to move that 2 pixels.
Okay, so what does that have to do with the WIP limit for the designer?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know how to put a WIP limit on it, right? Because if I put 2 on there and then everything else stops beforehand because we're waiting on him, then I have a bunch of wasted guys sitting around because they can't swarm on that, because in the end, it's ultimately his stamp that says this can go. He's almost like a customer who says, okay, now you can deploy. Well,
I think it's a pay me now or pay me later sort of situation. Sorry, Andrew, you were going to chime in there.
I was going to ask how would they, if their WIP limit was 1 in that situation, it's like, okay, I've got something that's done development and it's ready, maybe it's done development, it's done QA, it's ready for design review, and the designer's not available. What are the developers supposed to do in that situation?
I think that's That's why you have the WIP limit, is so that you can ask that question. What are we to do? We don't want that work to back up. We don't want to have a situation where we have no WIP limit, and the next thing we know, we have 5 things sitting there, and now we have 15, and now we have 30.
So now what do we do whenever, let's get past the designer. What do we do whenever we're a consulting company? What do we do when that backup is the customer? The customer says, I want to see absolutely everything before it goes out, even if it's a bug fix and the user will never see it. I want it to be vetted through me. And they have meetings and things like that, and they don't care to put more resources on it. They have one person that says, I'm the ultimate person, and that's it. Because there are a lot of companies that work that way.
Yeah,
and we work with them.
The customer's always right, essentially, is the answer to that. But if they're an equal participant and are willing to take criticism and feedback and are willing to adjust their approach to their benefit as well as to the team's benefit, I think that would be something that you would have a conversation with that person about, saying, you either need to give us more resources or we need to talk about changing the way our workflow is today. And that's one of the beauties of Kanban, is that you can visualize very clearly on your Kanban board. We have a slot. That slot is at the end of our board, and it says, to be reviewed by our customer. And it's constantly in violation of its WIP limits. There's constantly stuff backing up there. And everyone on the team can see that. And
what do you do when they say that's your problem?
It's as obvious as the mustache on Andrew's face.
What do you do? What do you do when they say that's your problem?
I think that's really more or less, Amos, honestly, a contract negotiation issue, and less about how you fix the problem. The right way to fix the problem is to say you will be engaged, you will respond to this queue, you will work this queue as work comes into it, and you will not let things back up.
I
and
agree
if things
when you're
back
in an
up,
ideal Agile environment, but we're not always in an ideal Agile environment. Most of the time we're not, because it's really hard to get customers to buy in, especially when you do get in that situation. It's awesome, but usually the contract is over so quickly because you fly through everything and you work so well that you then move on to one that's not so well. Or in our case, they hire a new CEO, and that CEO comes in and says, hey, I love what you guys are doing here, and I like this continuous flow thing that you got going on, but from now on, I'm the go-to guy, and I'm the only guy who can make the decision, and you just have to deal with that tough, because I'm not going to budge.
Well, one of the things you can do is you can move your finish line back. And you can say, okay, this person wants to review everything and they're not engaging to do it on a regular basis. So we're going to call where it's done from our perspective as the contract team right here. And once it passes over this line, it's in the client's hands.
We do that. We have certain states of tickets are considered closed. And after they're considered closed, that's for our metrics, is really the only thing that we use that for. We still have another Kanban board after that. Our Kanban board feeds their Kanban board, and when it gets to theirs, it might sit for a really long time, but then it comes back to us because we have to deploy it. And sometimes, because of the things that have sat there for so long, it is really painful to deal with. And I've tried to have that conversation with lots of customers, and a lot of them, we do this every day, but they obviously know better than us.
So you have a very complex real-world situation, and it's not something that we can necessarily solve within the scope of this podcast. But I think
that's part of what Kanban says it solves. And so now I'm playing the devil's advocate on you.
Okay, and that's fair. You son of a...
What about you, Andrew? How do you feel? Have you been in that situation, and how do you handle it?
Well, definitely on the previous project, we had a demo once a week for the customer. And so that's when it got, moved out of the ready for demo column into done. But that was only going to happen once a week, so things are going to back up during that week. Designers, as you mentioned, there's often a designer involved, but you very seldom have your own private designer who's going to be ready and available for you on a moment's notice. They're usually involved in several projects. And usually you don't need him 8 hours a day, but when you do need him, you might have to wait because he's involved with something else. So that's another thing that'll back up. And I guess I'm willing to work. I'm not as concerned with using the ideal Kanban and just working in the real world.
Well, so let me get back to one thing that Amos said, that Kanban can help with these situations. And I still think that if you compared Kanban to some other method that you would use to track stories, it may not be as easy to recognize the situation is occurring where a client is not, or somebody working a particular queue within your board is not being responsive to dealing with those. They may age without you knowing about them. They may queue up without you necessarily knowing about them. And again, the visualization part of a Kanban board is one of those things that gives you indicators that there are problems. And then Kanban doesn't necessarily solve that problem for you, but it allows you to identify that the problem exists, and it gives you a chance to take an action on it. That's what I think that's how I think Kanban addresses that, is by making the problem obvious to you, forcing you to deal with it sooner rather than later when you have more options available to you.
But you may not ever get to deal with it depending on the situation you're in.
Well, especially in something complex where it's a client, contractor.
And we've done weekly demo type things that Andrew talked about. And whenever we did weekly demos, yeah, it helped clear out that queue sometimes. But then at other times, the customer's like, I'm sorry, I only scheduled this meeting for an hour. I got stuff to do. See ya. And then you're halfway through a demo. And it's really frustrating when you have to demo 3 or 4 features. So you've merged all of these in, and you only got through 2 of them. So 2 of them are okay to deploy, but that third one isn't. So then you have to go and back merge that out and hope that you didn't screw anything up. So then later, if you had any merge conflicts, you have to deal with them all over again on that third feature.
Okay. Well, so another thing that I hear from people out in the industry, and also from some sales folks around here, is that Kanban is an advanced tool. It's an advanced process, and it's an advanced practice that is not easily usable by the average software development team out there.
That sounds like a sales tool to me.
It sounds like a sales tool? You mean?
Yeah, I think by saying it's advanced, that sounds like a sales tool.
So you need consulting services to come and help us?
Either consulting services, or you're not going to find somebody else who can produce your software because they're not advanced enough to use Kanban.
Okay.
I think that pretty much any team could put Kanban in place, even a waterfall team. I don't think that it has a whole lot to do with continuous change, really, at all, other than continuous change of maybe how you're working, but not what you're producing. So, if somebody wrote you a 1,200-page document that you turned into a bunch of stories, you could still put those through a Kanban board.
You just spend 3 months in each column. Of
Yeah,
Kanban
I mean,
board
obviously.
if you're doing waterfall.
Oh, man. Scrum waterfall.
Scrumban.
Scrumban.
Waterfall
Waterfall master.
So I think that Kanban is really approachable. So I disagree with the folks that are saying that. I also disagree that it's an advanced thing that's beyond the capability of most teams. I think it's one of the most approachable things beyond the daily stand-up meetings that you can do. I think it's something you can get started with quickly. Like you guys said, you could use existing user stories, documentation, requirements documentation to create a set of cards to populate a Kanban board with very easily and get started.
Yeah,
So we all disagree with the straw man.
Right. As is often the case.
Yeah, it just saying that it's an advanced tool that no one else is going to get just totally stinks of sales to me, like software assurance policies.
Did you hear that, Jason Tice?
Lean Six Sigma. I think we should talk about Scrum Masters.
You want to talk about Scrum Masters?
Yeah, because I don't really know what it is. Every time I've seen it, it's been some, like we talked about before, an advertising ploy. Like we're doing Agile because we have stand-up meetings and a Scrum Master. And you used to be a Scrum Master, John. So let's hear your sales pitch.
Throw that in his face.
Yeah, maybe we should have Tice up here so you can talk about Scrum Master and he can talk about Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and I can make fun of both of you.
I don't know why you want to make fun of me. Scrum is legit, right?
Like a morning stand-up? I see, that's what I'm saying. I don't really know. Scrum to me is a morning stand-up.
Well, that's not what Scrum is.
Well, what is Scrum? Enlighten us.
So Scrum is a implementation of an Agile software development methodology that has many more things, many more pieces to it than simply a morning stand-up, a daily stand-up.
So what are some of the other pieces, John?
So you've got fixed short sprints that have a fixed scope lock on them.
Iterations?
They're officially called sprints.
But is that an iteration?
It is an iteration.
So then we just talked about Kanban, which we talked about helps you kind of leave the iteration world.
Yeah, we did talk about it that way.
So if you're doing Kanban, can you not have a Scrum Master?
Yeah, it depends on. It depends. I think you can use. I mean, certainly people talk about doing things like Scrumban. They just want to jam Scrum and Kanban together and say, "We're doing Scrumban." It's more difficult to do Scrum and Kanban simultaneously because you violate a lot of the principles of Scrum by implementing and leveraging the flexibility of Kanban, or you give away all of the flexibility of Kanban through the implementation of a number of the Scrum practices. So one of the key practices within Scrum is locking the sprint, the scope of the sprint, which is completely 180 degrees opposite of what you would do with Kanban.
And we talked about in one of the other episodes is that I think that fixed scope even for a week is bad. It's to me is no longer agile. So maybe that's why every time I start going down the Scrum road and people talk about it, is I start shying away from it pretty quickly.
Sure, and I think it's probably less agile than completely flexible. Certainly, the Agile Manifesto would say that we embrace change and don't shy away from it. I think what Scrum was endeavoring to do was shorten the amount of time that you're locking anything to short iterations, so a week to 2 weeks, giving the team a chance to sharply focus on something. But to your point, it does take away some of the ability to respond to changing needs, changing winds that are blowing through your project and through your product owner's office potentially. And that was certainly something that we struggled with when I was a Scrum Master, was that there were often times during a sprint that the product owner was getting pressured to deliver some certain piece of functionality for an upcoming beta or an upcoming release. And it was very hard to have that conversation about reprioritizing or throwing the sprint out and starting over.
So it sounds like maybe Scrum would be a good position for a company who's new at Agile or wants to try it out as a midway point that might make them feel a little more comfortable with fixed scope and things like that, because they can at least focus themselves for a little bit and kind of be in that comfort zone for at least a week or two before they have to do any sort of change.
Well, that sounds like a salesy sort of pitch.
Oh God, don't accuse me of that, please.
Take that,
please,
mister.
John.
Take that. You take that, Amos. You called me a salesperson before.
Oh man.
Now you're getting it right back.
Can we make fun of Lean Six Sigma real quick so I can feel better about myself?
If you need to.
Oh.
I would hope that Scrum is not strictly limited to a brand new group trying to do Agile. And I would also hope that a brand new group that's trying to do Agile does not believe that their only choice in front of them is to start with Scrum and evolve from there.
Yeah, I think there's enough advertising around Scrum Masters and things like that a lot of people jump straight to that and don't realize that there's anything else. They think if you're Scrum, you're Agile, and that's the only way to be Agile.
It's interesting because Nate Mackey in one of our recent episodes was mentioning how the Agile conference had become at one point very Scrum heavy. And I think that's because there's more tangible stuff around Scrum. There's certifications to become a Scrum Master. There's more kind of Scrum in a box sort of stuff. Instead
of this big hippie free love Agile stuff that we got going on over here.
Instead of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of the hippie-free Agile stuff that we have going on, it's more structured. It's something more that somebody can pull off of the shelf and kind of start figuring out how it fits into their organization and start with small, narrowly scoped, fixed-scoped sprints. And
See, and we just said hippies and free love, and that makes me think of San Francisco whenever Apple and those guys were all going to town and building good stuff. Maybe hippie-free love is the reason why they got there, is because they didn't focus too far in the future.
wow. I mean, that's just a huge leap of
that was a big jump.
insanity.
That was a big jump. We need to make fun of Lean Six Sigma again to clean the air.
Have to cleanse the aura.
Since there's Lean Six Sigma like green belt and black belt and things like that, is there a Lean Six Sigma Cobra Kai? Sweep the leg.
There must be.
We should make a Lean Six Sigma Karate Kid video. That would be hilarious.
That would be great.
And we could have Tice star in it.
We could work with Dave Elf on that.
Who would be? Would Tice be Mr. Miyagi?
No way.
At that point, or would he be Cobra Kai? I think he'd have to be Cobra Kai. He'd be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's what happens, Jason, when you don't show up to the podcasting sessions.
We get to make fun of you, and you're not here to protect yourself.
So some of the other practices in Scrum are retrospectives. So that's something consistent with what we do in our hippie free love Agile that we do around here. Maybe that's what we should brand it.
Hippie free love Agile?
Yeah.
That would be good.
We could write a book.
We should write a book.
We'll get on that, guys, and
don't hold your breath.
we'll put it out there on Amazon. We'll sell it for $1.99.
Kindle users only.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Those are the primary practices: sprint planning, iteration planning, depending on how you look at it, and story sizing sessions.
So yeah, maybe next time somebody's talking to me about Agile and they freak out when I tell them how I work, I'll tell them, hey, a good halfway point for you. Maybe you should look up Scrum for a while. And then next year we'll talk again, and you'll be angry with that and want to move further.
Right. It's a good way to keep them coming back for more, maybe.
Oh, I'm not a sales guy. Stop that.
That's twice. That's 2 strikes.
Oh, gosh. I'm fired.
So hopefully I answered all your questions about Scrum, Amos.
Yeah, you did.
And Scrum
you
Masters.
Enlightened me a lot. Pretty much that's kind of what I've gotten in the past in pieces from different people, but I usually run away from the conversation halfway through. And luckily here you have me as a captive audience because I like to hear myself talk.
Right.
We didn't do picks. We could do picks.
Okay.
How about Destroy All Software? Destroy All Software is Gary Bernhardt. He has a lot of screencasts on there. It's $9 a month. He even encourages you to go ahead and pay for 1 month and download everything and then cancel your subscription because he knows you'll be back later. Gary has done a great job. He mostly does it in Ruby, but I've seen him touch on Python and Django and some other stuff like Vim or just using the command line. And it has been really good. I grabbed it and downloaded all of them this month. And was planning on canceling my $9 a month, but I think I may stick with it because I've been pretty impressed so far. So Gary, destroyallsoftware.com is awesome. Go get it.
So he got you with his sales pitch of, get me for a month.
He did.
Download it all.
He did get me. I just felt that they were so good that I might as well keep paying him $9 a month.
Okay, so my pick is a book. It's a book that I haven't read yet, but I'm dying to read it. And I actually listened to a podcast from the author. The author is Ryan Holiday, and the book is Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. And he was on Triangulation with Leo Laporte this past week, talking all about some of the guerrilla marketing tactics that he has used over the years. And it was a very interesting discussion with Ryan, and I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. So that's my pick for this week.
Can we just cut every time that John starts to talk, can we have it say, Trust Me, I'm Lying?
Okay, well, that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank my co-hosts for joining me today, Mr. Andrew Radford, who had to cut out early and is no longer here with us. We'll put some information on the show notes about Mr. Radford so that you all can find out more about Andrew.
And his mustache.
And his mustache and all the great things that he's up to today.
His mustache types faster than him, though.
I heard that.
Yeah. It actually, his mustache once had a run-in with Chuck Norris's beard, and it was a draw.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah,
Draw is huge with Chuck Norris's chin.
that's true.
And of course, as always, Mr. Amos King, thank you for joining us today. Where can people find out more about you, sir?
No problem. Best places to find me are on Twitter at Adkron, ADKRON, same name on GitHub, and you can find my blog at dirtyinformation.com, and maybe one of these days I'll get around to putting something else up there, or cleaning up the black and white, no images or anything CSS that's out there. It's pretty slim pickings when you look at it. You can make fun of me for that, John. You should go there right now and make fun of me. It's horrible.
I'm going to make you suffer through it on your own. And of course, I'm John Sextro, and you can find me at JC Sextro on Twitter, and you can find me on my website at johnsextro.com.
You need to make another Twitter account called JSex.
Right, with the
sign language.
Sign language.
Yeah.
How would you do that in Twitter exactly? You'll have to show me.
I don't know how I'd do it on Twitter. Just call it JSex.
Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Be sure to check out our website. I just put a new skin on our WordPress site out there at thisagilelife.com to find the show notes for this podcast. And keep living this agile life.